Welcome to the Shunned podcast, where we expose religions that use shunning as a tool to control people. Some quick business before we get started. As you know by now, I offer one-on-one coaching to help people recover from life in these high control groups. I work to help people grieve the past, find themselves, and then find a life that they actually want, not just the one they were given. I'm actually offering something special, so if you want to work with me, now would be a good time. I'm actually offering pay what you want pricing. That's not something you see very often, but I want to work with more people. I want to try to help more people. So, when you look at it, traditional therapy locally is usually, $100 plus per session. Online therapy is usually $80 or more. I typically charge $50 for coaching, which most people find reasonable, but I'm actually letting you decide the price. So the minimum is actually $20, but you decide from there. And by doing so, I'm hoping that I can help more people. So if you're feeling unhappy or stuck, send me an email at shunnedpodcast@gmail.com or reach out through any of the websites that I have, whether it's shunnedpodcast.com, ex-JWhelp.com or whatever, and let's start working together. We already lost so much time in these groups. You can certainly do some healing alone, of course, but when we work together on things, we can often heal a lot faster. And, we can also process things together, challenge perspectives, get new tools, find ways of different ways of looking at things, find acceptance, kind of go through this grieving process together. And in the end, more and more people have been reaching out for help, and seeing people that I work with actually start to find their voice, to make big changes in their lives, to be who they've wanted to be, or to just be proud of who they are. That's the best feeling in the world. Speaking of seeing people become who they are, or be able to speak to who they've been, today we actually have another brave person that's reached out to tell their story as part of the process of healing. It can be very cathartic to share your story with other people, to feel seen, heard, validated. So let's go on a journey with today's guest. As you listen, look for the lessons, look for the ways that maybe your story relates, and maybe you can learn about what has worked for this person, or maybe what hasn't. Maybe it's something that you can pull into your own life. If you were never involved in these groups, I get emails from people that just listen because they find these stories interesting or they find them inspiring. So please help spread the word. These aren't just cult stories. These are human stories. So many of the things that were experienced by the guests of this show are found in other areas of life. So share these episodes and let's help shine a light on the human experience. What's really going on in this world? You never know who it might help. So without further ado, let's go ahead and meet today's guest.
Hi, my name is Malina. I'm 44 years old. I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I faded and am soft shunned at this point.
All right, Malina. Glad that you were able to say that, because shunning takes a lot of different forms, and I'm sure we'll get to what that looks like later in the conversation.
For sure.
So how did it start for you? How did you come to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place? Were you born in?
I was born in, yeah. I was born in. My parents were both in the religion at the time. My dad eventually faded out, I guess. But yeah, born in.
Okay. So how did do you know anything about how your parents came into it? Like, does it go back generations, or were they kind of the start of it?
No, it doesn't go back generations. I know for sure with my mom, it was her mother who found the religion. Mm-hmm. She was in a hard time in her life, like many, many others who have been pulled into the religion, and needed something to ground her. And mm-hmm. I think she felt that the religion did that. My grandfather on that side was of Jewish descent, and although he wasn't a super practicing Jew, that was what he identified with, and he was strongly opposed to my grandmother becoming a Jehovah's Witness. In fact, didn't allow for the kids to go with her to the Kingdom Hall quite frequently, and I feel like in a lot of ways that's what has kept them all in a way. They were oppressed, I guess. What's the right word?
Persecuted.
They were persecuted. There you go. That's the word I'm looking for. Persecuted by their father and not allowed to go. So then it became something that was even more exciting to them, something that they knew they needed to do. because they weren't allowed to. I feel like in a way he pushed them towards it. But yeah, so that's on my mom's side. My dad's side, I don't know as much of the story. I know that my grandmother on that side I don't believe any of her family was witnesses before, because I knew her mom and they weren't witnesses. I remember going over there and them having Christmas tree and so forth. So
nice.
don't know how that started. And I didn't really know my grandfather's parents at all. And I don't know how far down the road that was, but
right.
Yeah, but my grandfather was an elder at one point on my dad's side. And then, so I had the two on my dad's side that were Jehovah's Witnesses their whole lives. Well, as for my whole life, I should say.
Right.
And then my mom's mom. And then her parents were not Jehovah's Witnesses. Her husband was not a Jehovah's Witness. So I do have quite a bit of family that's not Jehovah's Witness, that's extended.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's not like it encapsulated your entire family, but
Right.
but it does go back farther than just you and your parents. So that's so there is
Right.
more to it than that, which creates its own sort of pressure at times and things like that. So for you growing up, what was the worldview that being a Jehovah's Witness gave you?
Well, just like any Jehovah's Witness, I believed that all the people around me were going to end up dying in Armageddon, in God's war. And so I didn't get super close to people that weren't Jehovah's Witnesses for the most part, although I did have a few friends through the years that weren't. And it was always so hard on me. I felt like I couldn't contribute to the friendship in the way that they would. For instance, there was a girl I remember in high school who would bring me Christmas gifts or birthday gifts, and I never could I didn't even feel right taking them, but I also didn't feel right not taking them. And I never could reciprocate, and I was embarrassed. I guess I was embarrassed. I felt like I didn't really want to tell people I was Jehovah's Witness at a certain point in my life. As a littler kid, just like any other parent, my mom would talk with the teacher, bring me in and talk with the teacher, bring the little pamphlet and let them know that I wasn't going to be celebrating holidays and, sitting outside of the classroom or in a different classroom or maybe not going to school the day that they'd have holiday type parties. So, always the outsider, but at the same time, I wasn't picked on per se either. I was one of the fortunate ones that people liked me. I kind of just kept quiet, and I got along with most people. So I felt fortunate in that.
Yeah.
I wasn't super picked on because I know a lot of people, depending on where they lived and, their communities, probably had a harder time than me.
Yeah, that's interesting, that you brought up that awkwardness around the holidays and birthdays. And, like we all know, and we've talked about it a million times on here, how, Jehovah's Witnesses don't celebrate those things. But it's the awkward position that you're put in as a kid when somebody, just a well-meaning kid at school wants to give you something for your birthday or for Christmas or something. And it's that weird, do I take this and, Jehovah will hate me, or do I not take this? And, this person in front of me is going to, feel extremely insulted, right now to my face, like it's just really difficult. And you see in all these situations, whether it's you with the holidays or your parents going into the school and telling your teachers about what you believe and stuff, as a child, it's tough. You're put into a lot of really bad positions that oftentimes the adults aren't really put in so much.
Right. Yeah, it's so true.
It's a lot of pressure.
And my childhood was very interesting too, because we moved every year. Up until I was in sixth grade. I didn't go to the same school for a full year until sixth grade. I at least had two teachers every year until sixth grade. So a lot of moving. A lot of my childhood is kind of just blank because there was so much moving going on, and I felt like I didn't have a lot of roots except for where my family lived. That was my roots. My family was all here where I currently live, in California, and we would come back to California at least once a year, no matter where we were living at the time. And this was ground. So when we moved back here in sixth grade, that's like when I really start remembering my life. I know that sounds odd, but I have memories of various things through the years, of course, but nothing is quite as vivid as once we actually moved here.
Wow. So why, can I ask, why did you move so much? Was it just, jobs or something like that?
Yeah, for the most part, it was my dad. The major amounts of moving was because he would open these stores, mostly around California. We moved all around California. He would open these stores. He'd be there for, a certain amount of time to get it up and running and staff and so forth. And so then we'd have to move on to the next store that would open. So that was why we moved quite a bit. And then my dad and mom decided they just wanted to be able to put roots, I believe, for us kids more. So they decided to come back here to where home was. And my dad started his own window cleaning business. I know, that's shocking.
Of course. What else?
Window and blind and janitorial. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's see. So that would have been, you said the sixth grade. So how old are you then? Like 11, something like that?
Yeah, about that. Yeah.
Okay.
About that.
So kind of a blur before then. So once you start to settle down a little bit or settle in, what was life like at home? What was the environment in your home? Because you've been moving around for all those years. How was life?
Well, it was rough. My father had alcoholism problems. And honestly, even though he was Jehovah's Witness when I was born, and I believe even when my first brother was born, so I have 3 younger brothers, by the way. When my first brother was born, I believe he was still a Jehovah's Witness. But through the years, mostly I would remember him coming to the memorial once a year. And he always insisted that we go with my mother to the Kingdom Hall, go out in service, do all the things. I think he did believe that it was the right thing, and he wanted us children to do that because I do believe he cared for us, but I don't think he had the gumption to do it himself. I wish that I could talk to him about that because I'd love to know more.
Yeah, he probably felt shame because he knew he had this, secret shame thing, with the alcoholism that probably prevented him from going.
I'm quite sure that that's the case. Yeah. So home, as a little kid, it wasn't so bad. I was actually pretty close to my dad. But as his alcoholism progressed, things got worse and worse in the home. My brother just below me, who's 3.5 years younger than me, got picked on quite a bit by my dad. I remember some on the abusive side kind of things happening with him. In fact, I recall at one point myself calling Child Protective Services because I was old enough to see what was happening, and that was a scary time. I remember my brother even having to move out of the house for a little while and be with a friend, live with a friend because it got so bad with my dad. And it's not, there's much more abusive stories out there, but we definitely had abuse going on in our home, both verbally and just mentally. And then the one brother mainly was the one that got any kind of more physical abuse. I can't say that I was ever physically hurt by my father, but it was not a happy environment. Yeah. We didn't spend tons of time at home because of that. I don't think my mom even loved being home. We would be a lot at my aunt and uncle's house, who lived very close and had 6 kids that were basically my best friends growing up, my cousins. I have quite a few cousins. I think it's 13 or 14 of them.
Oh, wow.
But, so quite a few, all from mostly all from my mom's side. I only have 2 cousins from my dad's side. So lots of kids growing up, which was nice.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of had built-in friends because of that. And yeah.
So
I don't know.
so it was, I'm sure it was awesome to have those built-in friends. So and then also you mentioned the abuse again. Abuse is abuse. It doesn't matter what type it is. It's all hurtful and creates a lot of the same dynamics, issues, feelings, and not wanting to be at home. Did that create a situation? So I know you were encouraged to go to the meetings with your mom, but was he, did he do, like, as a family head, so to speak, did you all have to endure family study together and things like that? Or were you all kind of on your own for that?
Never with my dad. I don't remember my father studying with us once.
Gotcha.
My mom always tried so hard. And, she really, truly felt she was giving us the truth, and she tried. But, it's hard with basically, in a way, being a single mom of raising these 4 children in this religion. She struggled, especially with my brothers, because all of them went through rebellious periods, or, the 2 older of my 3 brothers, one of them never believed. He knew as a young child that it wasn't the truth. So she always felt like she was having to fight against that and try and get him in, and then there's me and my other brother, who both ended up baptized. The 3rd one didn't. And then I have the youngest one, who is still in the religion. Gotcha. So I'm lucky too, because I have two brothers that are no longer in the religion, and I have 2 lovely sister-in-laws who are not in as well. So I'm a fortunate person in that I do have a lot of family that I can still have around me, and I'm not fully shunned by any of my family. They'll still speak with me if they see me. I'm not necessarily invited to family gatherings and so forth, but anyway, sorry, I'm getting way ahead of ourselves here.
No, that's okay. I mean, but it speaks to the family and how it all plays out. But so, okay, so you've got your family. Now, what about, so you touched on a little bit at school, because you had these built-in friends, your cousins and such, and siblings, growing up. School, was that fraught for you? Did you even feel the need really for friends there? Were you pretty chill about everything because you had all these other friends in your family? I mean, because a lot of school is the social aspect of it. How was it for you?
It's true. I did have what I would call acquaintances at school that were not Jehovah's Witnesses. And I do feel fortunate that my mom never completely said you cannot hang out with anybody that's not Jehovah's Witness. There were even occasions, like I remember going in 9th grade with a girlfriend that was not a Jehovah's Witness to a concert in LA. And I still can't believe I got to do that. So there would be times that my mom allowed for things. I feel like she knew that we kind of needed things like that in our lives, So I do feel lucky in that way. But I was also lucky in the fact that I had a lot of Jehovah's Witness kids around too. There's this family here that, very spiritual family, dad's an elder, mom's a pioneer, several girls, and they were all just good friends of mine. One of them was my best friend, in fact, starting in 6th grade. And so for, I think it was 6th, 7th, 8th, several years, every summer we would go auxiliary pioneer, or at least get in the hours to auxiliary pioneer, because some of us were only publishers at that time and some were baptized. And we would go around. Well, I live on the ocean, near the ocean, and we'd go on the pier for early morning witnessing with backtracks or back magazines, the older magazines, and talk with people at 6, 7, 8 in the morning on the pier, or we'd go to laundromats, or, all of those things. And we had a lot of fun, actually. There's probably about 6 or 7 of us kids on some days that would go in this van, and we'd always listen to music and have a good old time and do our witnessing. You know, we called ourselves the God Squad. I do remember those times very fondly, and feel fortunate for those as well. Even though, you know, I feel like looking back here, I am trying to indoctrinate other people. Although I can confidently say I never brought anybody into it, so I feel good about that.
Jehovah's Holy Spirit never shined upon you or anyone you talked about.
Exactly. I never really had a study. I mean, I did, you know, have a study here or there, but nothing that ever progressed into anything. So that was good. But along with that, because these were very spiritual families, you know, there was that pressure to eventually get baptized, and pushed into that part, even though I feel like there was always something inside of me that knew, that questioned, but I would never allow for that to come up until later in my life. So
I just find it interesting that you keep referring to, because I mean, we all did. We would refer to, you know, a family as, quote, spiritual, and then we would go on to relate their titles like elder, pioneer, or whatever, right? and it's like, you don't know how, you know, spiritual, what does that really mean? We don't really know the spirit of those people. We don't know who those people were. We don't know how they really thought or felt about anything. All we know is their performative aspects, that they were an elder, and so they did certain things, or they were pioneer and they put in so many hours. But you know, and I remember as a young man, when I was a ministerial servant one time, going to the elders and saying, like, you all appointed me a ministerial servant. And I asked them, I said, why? You know, you say I'm spiritual, but how do you know that? No one's ever asked me if I do any personal study. No one's ever asked me if I, you know, how I feel about any of this stuff or whatever. And they basically looked at me blankly, and they were like, well, I mean, you know, you're getting the national average or more in field service, and you're, you know, you're at all the meetings and you comment and you participate. So we just assume you must be, quote, spiritual, right? And it just shows how devoid of any real connection any of it is. It's just all about performance. And so I always just find it funny when we refer to people as spiritual, just because, and then go on to relate their titles or that are related to performance somehow in the cult. You know,
well, that's how you gauge it as a Jehovah's Witness, right?
It is. It's absolutely how it was gauged. But you know, we don't know how connected that person really felt to Jehovah, or if they were doing it for the right reasons, or if they loved God or they loved others. They might have just been doing it out of obligation, you know?
Could very well be. I mean, I don't know. I was at their house so often. I felt like I knew these people, and who knows, you know, but I did see things going on in the family that were, you know, what you would call, quote unquote, spiritual, like, you know, the family study and the praying over dinner and a lot of the things that didn't necessarily happen in my home. So I always felt like they were the people to look up to.
Yeah, you know? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But again, it's just that, you know, we see people's appearance, but no one ever really gets to know each other enough to know how anybody feels about anything for real.
That's true. You don't necessarily know deep down what they're thinking or feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know, those were the families though that we all looked up to or hoped to be a part of at times, if that was our family maybe. But so you're going to the Kingdom Hall. You've got the God Squad, at least at one point in your life. So, so were you all? Did you enjoy the meetings and field service and things like that? Did you have a lot of? Sounds like you might have had quite a good experience as far as people being in your life at the Kingdom Hall.
Yeah. Like I said, I felt fortunate because I did have quite a few people around me. I didn't feel like I felt like there was definitely cliques within the congregation, just like anywhere. And I never felt like I was in one of the outcasts. So I always felt part of the congregation, even though with my dad not coming, we were looked at as, you know, the family with the single mom. people would try and help us more because of that, in a way, and we were invited to things more, but that was because we really did try spiritually, I guess. If we were if we were not going out in service and doing those things, I'm sure we would have been more outcast. But anyway, so I felt like it was very, for the most part, I liked going to the Kingdom Hall at a certain point. But, further into your teen years and then up into my 20s, that's when it got harder to focus on it or believe it fully. That when you get into your adult years and you really start seeing more of the world, it's hard not to question things. So that's
absolutely.
when it happened for me later. But yeah, so on with my story, I did end up getting baptized at, I can't remember, it was like 16, I think it was 16 and a half, something like that.
What pushed you to that? I always like to ask people that if I can. What, when you got baptized at 16, did you feel pressure or peer pressure, or were you just into it, or what was the case? Were you sincere?
There was quite a few factors that come along with that. First of all, yes, the family I was talking about, all of those girls were baptized, and they're all moving in that direction. And of course, they encouraged me in that direction. So I felt like I needed to move in that direction myself. I was approached by a sister in the hall who asked if I'd like to study with her. And so I started studying with her. And, there's that pressure that comes along with the study after quite a while, or not quite a while, but after a little while, they're like, hey, are you thinking about baptism? And, I would say yes, but I wasn't really focusing on it until about 15 and a half. It probably wasn't that far into my studies, but I met who would become my future husband. One of my other friends around here, her brother was friends with him. He lived in another state, but he was here living with his grandmother, who was not a Jehovah's Witness, and going to college here for like a 2-year degree in welding. And I met him because I was hanging out with my friend, and he was around because of her brother, and we kind of just started getting to know each other, and obviously had attraction of some sort. And, we ended up going down that road of dating, I guess, even though I was super young, 15 and a half, way too young. And I say way too young, not way too young to date, but way too young because as soon as you start dating, as you know, as a Jehovah's Witness, it's supposed to be in view of marriage.
Absolutely.
So immediately that's what you're thinking about, And that, I believe, between that and the sister who was studying with me kind of pushing towards it, I didn't feel like I had a choice. He was a baptized witness. In fact, he was pioneering. He was invited out to Bethel. That was an interesting situation because he was invited out to Bethel, but had just met me. Oh. And one of the questions on the application, at least at that time, was, do you have any ties to anybody back home that would keep you from focusing? And he made that decision that he better not go because he didn't think that he could focus on what he needed to do. Interestingly, of course, that was used against me later. It was my fault he didn't go to Bethel, But yeah, interesting. So I feel like because I knew that I had to get baptized to be able to marry my husband, and also just the peer pressure of it all and the pressure from the sister I studied with, that's why I ended up getting baptized. Just prior to meeting my husband, though, I had what I would consider my first boyfriend. He was also, so just about 15. I met him when I was 13 or 14. They were a family that was, I don't know how to describe it. They were a little more needy. My mom helped their mom. She was on the sick side. I don't remember exactly what she had. She had something going on sickness wise that she couldn't do a lot for herself. And they, and it was her and just a few, and her children, and they were just, lower income. My mom really tried to always help, even though we were always pretty poor as well. My mom always tried to help people like that. So she'd give rides to the store or, help them out in other ways. And I got to know these kids, but they weren't super strong spiritually, if you want to put it into category. And anyway, he and I, we liked each other, and, just like normal teenagers do, you explore things a little bit. We never went super far with physical contact. Let's just put it that way. But enough that I had guilt. Mm-hmm. And so as I'm doing the studying, I really felt like I couldn't truly dedicate myself to God because I had so much guilt surrounding that. I never talked to the elders about it. I don't know how I ended up actually getting myself to do it, but I still to this day feel like it wasn't fully dedicating myself. Yeah. So that was, but really the main reason was so that I could get married.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's it for a lot of people, right? Mm-hmm. You can't have any relationship inside the organization if you're not baptized, or, it's not going to be supported by the congregation for sure, or by your family, usually if they're witnesses. So, it's a lot of pressure, you're talking about a 16-year-old kid. Well, actually, I guess you were 15 at the time or whatever. That's a lot of pressure. How much older was he than you?
Just a couple years. When we ended up getting married, I was 18 and he was 21.
Gotcha.
So,
okay.
Yeah, he could barely drink, and I couldn't for several years. I still can't believe I got married at 18. It's crazy to think back to. But yeah. So we started dating, I guess, about when I was 16, right around the time I got baptized. And then he moved away for a while we were dating. And because he lived in a different state. But then came back, and we ended up getting married the day I turned 18. Mm-hmm. I was still in high school. I had not graduated high school. I was one of two people that were married in the high school that were students.
Oh, there was another one, really? Okay.
Surprisingly, there was another one, and she wasn't a Jehovah's Witness. So,
wow.
Yeah, that was quite interesting. Quite interesting going to school from April until June, my senior year. That was fascinating. But anyway, yeah, so got married at 18 years old, and stuck around here for another year with my own family. Things were going downhill. The day my dad wasn't really happy that I was getting married. As looking back, I don't blame him at all. I really wish I would have listened. He felt I was too young. And in fact, we went through a pretty traumatic time. At about 17, my dad said, if you really think you're going to get married, I want you to prove you can do it. So you're going to invite him over, and you're going to cook the whole meal, and you're going to clean the whole kitchen, and you're going to be the host that you need to be able to be a good wife. And so that was an interesting situation because he showed up. He was pretty gracious, considering what he went through. Because at one point when he showed up at my house, my dad came out of his bedroom with a shotgun on his hip.
Oh, wow.
And basically said, you treat my daughter right. Or, you're going to.
Or we're going to go out shooting.
I don't know. Exactly, yeah. So the fact that he even came back to my house to have dinner is still shocking to me. But it was quite a bad experience. My dad was really drinking a lot, and he said some awful things about me to my husband, or my, fiance at that time, basically comparing me to things that he hated about my mother and things like that. It was a really awful, traumatic time. And I couldn't wait to leave. I feel like if that didn't happen, and if I didn't feel completely like devastated by my father, I may not have gotten married at 18, but I felt like I couldn't wait to get out of that house.
Yeah, a lot of people get married young to get out of their JW family's house.
Yeah. And interestingly, it wasn't the JW part that was the problem. It was my dad's, drinking. But I do believe that the alcoholism really related to the religion, knowing or believing that it was the truth, possibly. I wish I knew. But believing it was the truth and not following it, I assume was probably eating him up.
That's a shame.
Yep. So got married at 18, lived here in this area for about a year. And then we ended up moving to the state that he was from, where his parents were. And I left all my family behind at 18, or 19, excuse me, up there. It was a, interesting and growing experience. But we were young. We were kids. We were not prepared for a marriage by any means. He cheated on me about 2 years into our marriage with a neighbor. Didn't tell me for about a year. Just treated me really horribly for that time period. I gained a lot of weight. I was super unhappy, very depressed. Didn't want to go to meetings, didn't want to do anything. And worse, he just decided that he was not going to go to meetings anymore himself. He kind of, he never was the head that I thought he was going to be. When I thought I'm going to get married this man who was invited to Bethel and I'm going to start my life here, I went from a father who didn't want to take headship, and I'm going to have a head now. It's in my mind, that was a good thing. I was going to have my spiritual head, but it never was that. He started right off the bat pretty much with lots of problems. Started drinking a little bit himself, which scared me to death because here I had a father who was an alcoholic and I didn't even want to look at alcohol. And so him even drinking a beer freaked me out. And I feel like in a lot of ways he would do things like that just to drink and have friends over and drink and do things that would bother me just to bother me, if that makes any sense.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that so happens sometimes.
Yeah. So we went through periods. I actually, after he cheated on me, I kind of had a situation with another brother where we got a little too close. I didn't ever go too far, but at the same time, it was something that ate me up guilt-wise, just like the little bit that did happen. And I ended up having to tell my husband, even though he had cheated on me, I was the one that ended up having to go to the elders and being privately reproved. And
I was wondering what happened to him. If he, because he cheated on you, did he get disfellowshipped or anything? Or I guess he just never even went to the elders?
Well, interestingly, he had cheated on me prior to this with this guy that I'm talking about, but he didn't tell me. And it was during that whole time, I think that it was happening with the neighbor and him, that things were happening with this guy. And I feel like maybe subconsciously I knew something was going on, and I was looking for just any kind of comfort, really was all I was looking for. I felt horrible about myself. I'd gained tons of weight. My husband didn't want to even touch me, and it was awful, awful, awful. And, but I felt guilty. I went to my husband, he went to his wife, we went to the elders. It was a whole private reproof thing because nobody really knew, thankfully, besides my husband. But interestingly, it wasn't too much longer after that. We moved to a different house. And after we moved, he came out and told me that he had cheated with that neighbor. But I always
he let you live with your shame for a while before he decided to tell you. He waited to get away from the situation, and then he let you know Oh, by the way. Yeah,
Oh,
me
yeah.
too. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and he forbade me to ever go to that house. I was not allowed to go confront her. I was not allowed to tell the husband that she was married to. I was like controlled completely from that point.
But in your situation, when it was you on the hook, you had to, go tell people and
I had to confess everything.
confess
Yeah.
and all this stuff.
And of course, he got to be part of the judicial committee that met with me because he was my head. But do you think I got to be part of the meeting when he cheated on me?
Yeah.
I didn't get to be part of that meeting. I didn't get to have any say. And in fact, I was encouraged as a wife to forgive him and move past it. And that, he was repentant and everybody makes mistakes and all that.
He's just a man.
Mm-hmm.
Doing what men do. I hate that stuff.
Exactly, yeah. But, you kissed the guy. How dare you?
Yes.
Like, yeah, it was that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was rough. And that was really the beginning to the end for him and I. And it should have been the end right then. But of course, you know the rule. If you reconsummate the marriage, you no longer have a foot to stand on. And I was in a very emotional spot one night after this happened, and we ended up reconsummating our marriage. And so then I was stuck with him again.
Yep.
And regretted that pretty quickly. But come to find out, he was actually, I don't know if he would never admit that he was actually cheating, but one of the gals in the congregation I was in, and he, who had known each other for years and years, because we're in the congregation he grew up in, started hanging out together. And at that point, he just was doing everything he could to push me out. I don't think he had the gumption to say he didn't want to be with me anymore. He didn't have any leg to stand on. He had reconsummated our marriage. And so he was stuck with me too. And he didn't want to be the bad guy. So he made my life miserable at home. And he started separating everything. I think he knew he was going to be able to push me out. So he started, he got me off his checking account and had me open my own separate one. He closed our dual credit card and opened me my own, those kind of things, Looking back on it, I knew later that he was pushing me out, but at the time I didn't understand it. I was just hurt and not really understanding anything. I was still so young, you know? Anyway, then I found out he was hanging out with this girl, and it was an interesting time. I was just very distraught about everything. I really wanted to leave my marriage. And I started questioning the religion. And I thought, he hasn't really been doing much in the religion anyway. I wonder if he ever questions. And I thought maybe if I talked to him about that, maybe it could repair some things. Maybe we could talk about this and really examine this, and who knows? Mm-hmm. So one night I actually went to him and said, have you ever wondered if this is actually the truth? And that was the end. That was the end. He was very angry about that question at all, despite the fact that I don't even know the last time he had gone to the Kingdom Hall.
Yeah.
So at that point, I was completely pushed out. He and I had always had this dream to go to New Orleans together. That was our dream. We were going to someday travel to New Orleans. And his dad, who, by the way, was not a Jehovah's Witness at all, traveled quite a bit for work. And he had this opportunity to go to New Orleans and offered to let us come and stay at the hotel room with him because he got it for free, obviously, through the company. And we could go explore the city. Well, he went without me. And that was, I guess at that point, I kind of started planning my getaway. And when he came back from New Orleans, he started treating me cruddy, told me I had to lose weight, told me I needed to keep a better house and have meals ready for him and all of these things, or he was going to leave. And I said, well, too late. You don't have to leave because I'm going to. I'm ready to be done with this. He basically said, great, I'll buy you a plane ticket anywhere you want to go. And I said, no, I'd like to have one of the vehicles, and you can give me the money for the plane ticket because I'm sure I'll need it. And basically, he helped me pack up my truck, and I drove away. Now, back up a little bit. I was going through a bit of a manic episode, I believe. That's what my doctor told me later. I was on antidepressants for quite some time, from about the time he cheated on me, and dealing with a lot of anxiety and depression that I'm sure surrounded the religion as well.
Oh, yeah.
And I went to my doctor just before all this happened, and I was saying that, you know, although the medication was helping me that I was on, that I didn't feel it was helping me enough, and she changed my medications around. Come to find out, I was taking more than I should have been, and she believes it threw me into a manic episode. So at 22, I guess, or was it 22 or 23, something like that, I hopped in my truck I was in Washington at this time, and I decided I was going to drive to Cleveland, Ohio.
As one does.
Right? And it all surrounded, I had been playing a video game that actually my husband got me into online. I had met somebody who was just sympathetic, a guy that was sympathetic, and he just said, if you ever need a place to run, because I kind of confided in him a bit about the religion, about my husband and stuff. He was like, if you ever need a place to run, you could run here. Well, when I felt like I had no choice and I needed to leave, I decided that's what I was going to do, even though I'd never met this person. So yeah, I started driving.
Can I ask you a question about something that happened in your marriage there before you get to the next chapter?
Absolutely. Yeah, and actually, I probably should back up a little bit to a very big thing that happened in my life that I forgot about. But yes, please ask.
Okay, I just wanted to ask. So you said that you started doubting the truth, you know, and you started questioning the religion. Do you know what was it that made you start questioning it? Was it, you know, the behavior of your husband, or being in these weird judicial, you know, things, or you know, what was it that made you start questioning it in the first place?
Right. Yeah, I do believe it had to do with the judicial process and seeing the hypocrisy. Here, my husband had fully cheated on me and admitted to having sex with our neighbor. And me, I felt guilty for confiding in a man, and we did kiss once. Not to say that, you know, emotionally it's probably about the same, but I felt like it was so hypocritical that I was not allowed to talk about what happened to me, basically, with anybody. Yeah. My husband, I guess he was privately reproved, possibly, I think. But the whole process felt so like he got a little slap on the wrist. And I felt like, for me, I was grilled for a couple hours, part of the time with my husband in the room. And I had to talk about every little detail of everything that happened with me. And it just didn't feel right to me. I felt like something was not right.
So so it was kind of the exploitative nature of the process that made you kind of say something here is not quite right. And, you know, here my husband, you know, he gets a slap on the wrist for what he did. Were you publicly reproved or privately?
No, I was private.
Oh, private as well. Okay.
I think I was. You know what? My brain has not even kept that part in.
Yeah. I just, you know, either way it sucks, but, you know, if they announce it, it feels a lot worse sometimes. But, you know, regardless, the damage is done in those meetings. And so that is kind of then what helped you to see that you needed to explore. So then when you did start exploring, like, what did you do? You know, did you jump right into quote unquote apostate material? Did you start looking up things about Jehovah's Witnesses, you know, in encyclopedias or something? What was it that was your first step?
No, to be quite honest, I didn't look into anything for years. I kind of did the run and then stick my head in the sand. I questioned in my head for a moment, but then I didn't have the gumption to go research it. I honestly felt like I was just being wrong, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't continue the way I was, and I wanted to just go. I guess in a way, I wanted to go explore without questioning further into the religion, just explore the world a little more. And boy, did I do that. Well, not that it was great, but
you know, it's so basically, you know, it's not even like you committed some great apostate act. All you did was dare to have a doubt and then say to your husband at the time, hey, basically, have you ever had a doubt? Which, you know, just melted down, you know, so much. It just goes to show that you don't even, they are so sensitive to any of this stuff that you don't even have to, you know, go. It's not like you committed some huge act of betrayal. You just dared to have a thought of your own one time and said, hey, you know, like something here doesn't quite look right. Have you ever wondered about this? And
exactly.
That's all it takes. And then, you know, they really dig in with just such a basic question.
Yep.
You're not allowed to.
And yeah. And, you know, I think had he approached it differently with me, like, I was sincere. Have you ever wondered? Have you ever looked into it? How do you know it's the truth? And, you know, that's a question I've asked my mom more recently, even. How do you know? And he gave the same answer that my mom did, which was, I just do. I just know in my gut. And that's it. And I was like, but how did, you know, I don't know. And but it offended him. It offended him to a degree that he couldn't even look at me as the same person anymore, is what it seemed like.
Yeah.
So sad. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just crazy how it takes very little. I remember years and years before I ever left Jehovah's Witnesses, I referred to us, because it was me too at the time, as Jehovah's Witnesses, as I said J-Dub, you know, J and W, and I just said J-Dub in short for Jehovah's Witnesses. And my mom was like, that's an apostate term and blah, blah, blah. You're an apostate. And I was like, what the heck? What? I just thought it was a clever way of saying Jehovah's Witness. There was just like shorthand for it. I don't know. I just get tired of saying Jehovah's Witnesses all the time. I said J-Dub. And it was like just the most disrespectful thing to her to shorten it. And she told me I was never allowed to do that again and all this stuff. And I was, well, first of all, if it's apostate, how do you know? You know, right. You're accusing me of being apostate. How do you know?
Have you looked into it?
Yeah, I know. I think my mom's looked into a lot of stuff. And then, you know, second of all, you know, like I was just saying a thing like they're so sensitive to any perceived slights, any lack of respect shown to something that they've given their all to, that they just can't tolerate any questioning or anything like that. You know, it really shows how culty it gets, that there's no freedom of thought surrounding it anymore, or even freedom of expression.
Right. And I think ultimately that's what pushed me. I think if he had said, well, why don't we sit down and, you know, talk about it or read about it, and had approached it in a more like calm, normal manner, he probably could have pulled me right back under.
Absolutely.
But instead, he reacted the way he did, and it made me question even more.
Yeah.
It felt culty, even though I didn't understand what culty meant back then. Mm-hmm. But as far as the questioning things go, yeah, I mean, I moved ultimately in the end out to Cleveland, Ohio, and I was there for 8 years. And I never looked into anything the entire time I lived in Ohio. I literally just buried my head in the sand. I lived life. It wasn't the best, but at least it was free. Yeah. And I basically knew I didn't believe the religion, but I had no idea why. I didn't know what was wrong.
You just knew something was wrong.
Specifically, I just knew something was wrong, and I was too scared, really, at the time still, to really look into it. You know, you picture God's, lightning coming down and striking you if you look at apostate literature, as they call it, So I just didn't question until a little closer. In fact, I didn't really truly look into anything until I moved back from Ohio back to California, at which point I started digging. And I still remember the first time I looked anything up on the internet at home. I was home alone, well, except with my daughter. And I'm looking at this website and I'm literally crying and shaking because I am scared. Mm-hmm. And there's a knock on my door. And do you know, it was Jehovah's Witnesses. It was the creepiest thing to me. And it scared me so bad that I couldn't look again for a while. Because I thought, oh my goodness, that was Jehovah's sign that I shouldn't be looking at this, right?
Right, right.
I still had that indoctrinated thought of, oh, that's my sign, that I shouldn't be doing this.
Absolutely. And that, if you're already fearful that lightning is going to strike when you look, it's like Jehovah just kind of fired a warning shot at you, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So then I just reburied my head in the sand, and eventually, as I lived here and I'd start hanging out with my cousins who had left, or my brothers who had left, I would start talking a little bit with them about why they didn't believe, how they found out, what they knew. And in fact, interestingly, I had a guy reach out to me that had been my ex-husband's really good friend. And he was, in fact, a ministerial servant when I knew him. And he reached out to me on Facebook years later, and he had left. He was super, super smart. He is a super smart guy, very computer literate. He's just very smart and very, loves science and things like that, which is what got him, interestingly. But anyway, he reached out to me to apologize about things that happened. And I talked to him about it. Like, how did you discover it? And he kind of pointed me in directions. And of course, one of the directions that I landed up in was Lloyd Evans. Like most people, he was the most prominent and really the only one on the internet at that time that he was easy to find, basically. So of course I started watching videos and listening, and completely unindoctrinated myself. Thank goodness for videos.
Yeah. Well, it's important to have these things.
Yep. So,
wow. Well, I'm glad that you did end up eventually, being able to look into it, but it just, that thread is pulled the whole way through of just, the fear that is there to look at anything or to question openly, or and one of the reasons there is that fear is because you dare to say anything and people are ready to be done with you instantly, and right. And so it just goes to continue to perpetuate that fear that if I dare to think for myself, ask a question, or look at something that's not on jw.org, I'm going to suddenly lose somebody in my life. And you have to do everything kind of under the cover of darkness, so to speak. And it's just, when you just think about what it takes to even do that, to question or to dare to look into anything, it shows a lot of courage to be able to, but it also shows how messed up Jehovah's Witnesses are, that people have to feel like they have to, they're in some sort of, they have to be like spies or in some secret, thing to try to look at what they believe, to research their own beliefs or whatever.
Which
it's just
is ridiculous.
Crazy. Yeah,
it's just so ridiculous. Yeah. And it's the thing that I've verbalized most often to anybody who wants to talk to me that's currently a Jehovah's Witness. I have had a few people come to me questioning or talking or asking, and that's my biggest question. Like, how, if it's truly the truth, it should stand up to anything.
Yes.
Why can't you look into it? That is a huge red flag,
Yes. Yeah.
But not something that we saw. I think you have to really understand cults and how they work to truly get that. And I think too many people that are Jehovah's Witnesses are scared of that word because it's been used against them,
No, yeah. And no one wants to admit that they were in a cult at some point in their life. Yep. So it's because, we feel stupid or less than or whatever for having had that experience when it's just, it's not the truth at all. It doesn't mean that we're stupid or anything. We were just in a certain situation, and then that's all it is. And it's just I always like the quote, I'd rather have questions I can't answer than answers I can't question. We weren't allowed to question the answers that we were given. We weren't allowed to look at them. And that just shows that it was all about control. Now, I know, this kind of threw you off from where you were, but I wanted to, kind of get an idea of what it was because that's a pretty big moment in your life, there with your husband, that you started to actually question it. I didn't realize at the time it was just, you literally just asked the question. Like you weren't even coming with a lot of research or anything. It was just a simple question.
No, it's true. It's true. Yeah, it wasn't. I was not researching anything. I wasn't talking to apostates. Literally, it was just this genuine question in my mind, spurred on from just things I saw. Another thing that made me upset and question was, in the beginning with my husband and I, we would go to the Kingdom Hall together. He was doing quote unquote really well in the eyes of the congregation. He, in the beginning, he'd pass the microphone and he'd give talks and he did all those things, working towards ministerial servant. But once that was the very beginning of our marriage, and then it waned quickly. I believe it was because he ended up cheating on me, and I think the guilt was eating him. He just stopped going to the Kingdom Hall. He cited depression, which I do believe he had depression. So did I. He'd end up having to work, or at one point he wanted to go back to school to do some kind of computer work. Like, he would use excuses of why he wouldn't go. And so I would always be the faithful witness to go to the Kingdom Hall. And people would come up to me, and it wasn't like, oh, it's so good to see you, or any of that. I mean, they may say those words, but the next thing out of their mouth would always be, how's your husband? What's going on? We miss him. Tell him we miss him. And, and I always felt like I was just this, I wasn't me. I was his wife.
Yes, that is exactly it.
And that really bothered me too. And part of that I felt like stemmed from the fact that he grew up there and I didn't. So of course they knew him, and he was the one that they had loyalty to, I guess. So I can understand that. But here I was trying to do the right thing, be at the Kingdom Hall, do the best I could. And I didn't feel like I got a lot of support through that,
Oh, no, you don't. I think, a big part of it is just that Jehovah's Witnesses always focus on the negative. So they see the thing that's not there, and that's what they always pick at. That's what they always talk about. I had friends as well that went through the same circumstances locally. Neither of them were originally from the congregation that we were in, but where the sister would go, and then she'd be so mad when she'd get home because, they kept asking her about her husband, and she's like, why don't you go tell them you're not there?
I know.
Why do I get grilled for this? And I remember when I was going to stop going, my wife Jenny said, she knew she couldn't do it on her own because she knew she'd have to face all those questions. And it was just, there's those questions they're insulting in a way. They're, as though you're supposed to somehow have control of him.
Exactly.
and there's nothing there for you. It's no like atta girl for being there and doing that on your own.
True, it's true. Yeah. It was like, I don't know. People are too much. I always wanted to say, if you're wondering about him, why don't you call? Why don't you go by?
Oh, yes, that's always a big thing. Yes, but they're not going to do that.
And what do you think I am, his mother? That was the other sassy thing I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Of course, his mom always did walk around behind him with a broom, so that's probably what they were expecting.
Yeah, that might be it.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was basically my Jehovah's Witness story.
Right.
But there were some huge events in my life that I probably should go back to.
Okay.
The main one. So, as I told you, my dad going back to just before I got married, my dad really didn't want me to get married. Surprisingly, I got him to actually come to the wedding, which was kind of one of those throw it together at the town hall kind of things, because we had kind of gotten ourselves into a little bit of trouble. Nothing major, of course, but we were privately reproved again, basically together at that point. And well, that was the first time that it happened for me. And anyway, my mom decided we should just get you married. Let's get you married at 18. Like the day I turned 18, like I said, we got married. My dad decided to have a little family get together at a local restaurant here to celebrate. We didn't really have a reception till like a year later at a park, but he decided to buy whoever wanted to come dinner at this restaurant, and he proceeded to get completely schnockered drunk. And me and my husband left probably, right after we ate. We were eager to go.
Sure.
You know how it is.
Sure, of course.
There's one reason you get married, really, if you want to be honest about it. So we left, but apparently my dad moved on and really got drunk, and then proceeded to want to drive my mother and brothers home that way. And my mom and him got into an argument, and my dad was driving erratically. I don't know why she got into the car, but the whole fear and guilt thing.
I've seen that a million times with my own parents.
Yep. So, but she managed to get him to pull over because he was driving erratically. They got out of the car. She went to her sister's house and then basically never went back to my dad. So that was all the day I got married.
Wow.
That my whole family imploded at that point. My mom tells me later that she basically was just holding it together until I got married, because she wanted my dad to be at the wedding for me and didn't feel he would be if they blew up before then. So that was her reasoning, which I think was loving, but I think she should have left earlier because it was getting abusive from my brother. Anyway, things with my father really digressed from there. He got into drugs. We're pretty sure heroin at a certain point. He had a girlfriend. I think even before my mom left, he had a girlfriend. My mom ended up getting into her own housing with my three brothers. Would sometimes allow my dad to see the boys, but it was not a good situation. He was definitely doing things he shouldn't be doing,
Sure.
And so I'm an adult here, a young adult, but an adult who's married. Me and my husband had moved up to Washington by this point. And I worried because, like, my mom tells me a story one day that my dad had broken into her house claiming that he needed to use the restroom. But she was pretty sure he was looking for money. Like those kind of things, those kind of stories coming out from my mother when I'm living states away scared me. And I worried constantly. And I kept questioning if I should come back. And then at a certain point, about my grandparents, my dad's parents, came out to visit me and my husband in Washington. They lived in Arizona. And my dad and mom here in California. So that's where everybody was. Anyway, they came to visit us, And my dad at that time had ended up moving out to Arizona with his parents, living on their property in a trailer with his girlfriend, trying to kind of restart life with her. They were really wanting to leave and move away to Hawaii, where he lived previously, and in fact, where I was born. So he wanted to get away and trying to start his life, but they were into drugs, and things weren't good with them, apparently. While my grandparents were visiting us, they told me kind of what was going on. I knew that he was, with her and doing things that he shouldn't be, and I was an uppity, so I was witness at that time, who felt I should shun my father, Well, anyway, they called home to make sure how things were going at the house, because my dad was back at the house and they had animals and stuff. And my dad asked to talk to me, and I refused. I told him when he was doing better that I would talk to him, and still remember seeing my grandfather on his phone, or on my phone, talking to my dad. And when he said no, she wants to wait until you're doing better, he had to pull the phone away from his ear because my dad was screaming and calling me names. To this day, I feel guilty about that, because it wasn't even a month later that I got a call at 6 a.m. in the morning, and my mom told me that my dad had committed suicide. So I was only about 20, and I, to this day, wish I had talked to him. He wasn't doing good. I knew that, and the first feeling I had when my mother called me was relief, because my mom and brothers were safe, and I was scared of him because of all of that. But man, that was rough. That was rough, and a huge event in my life that even years later I probably haven't fully processed.
Sure.
I've done quite a bit of work around it in counseling and stuff, but I just wish I had had a chance to talk to him and understood his true beliefs.
Right. Well, it's one of those things. First of all, I'm really sorry that happened. It's anytime that happens, it's horrible, and it ends up transferring the pain of one individual to those who are left behind. And he obviously had a lot of pain in his life for a long time, with the alcohol and everything else. He was escaping a lot, and it doesn't seem like he was a super happy man. But it's one of those things where we all wish we could go back and get certain information. Obviously you all weren't going to have that discussion that day anyway, about his beliefs and stuff. But it's just, it's hard because, people sometimes leave and there's unanswered questions, and we just don't get a chance. We don't get a chance always to get all of our questions answered. But it's obvious he was just a hurting human being, and had been for a long time. And,
True.
It's one of those things too, where, shunning, man, we were taught our whole lives that the way to help people was to cut them out. Right. And, it's just, we all thought we were doing what was right and cutting people off at times. It was just we had good intentions. We were just given a really bad tool to use in all of these situations.
It's true. I think the hardest part too about the whole thing was, I did wish that I had talked to him, and I almost felt like at that day he wrote me off as even being his child, because he did leave a suicide note, and he mentioned my mom and he mentioned my brothers, and there was no mention of me in that letter. And it was a rough situation, and I fully blame the religion, because I feel like he was a very unhappy person because of it, like all of us were, and
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly played into it. Not a lot of super mentally and emotionally healthy people inside of Jehovah's Witnesses. A lot of
Yeah.
people who have been hurt or who need help and haven't been able to seek it out because they've escaped into a certain belief system, and then that heaps extra shame on them if they have problems. And I don't know your dad's history. Who knows? Maybe he was abused or had something that went on
Oh
in his
yeah.
past that he never dealt with. But then you just have these really bad combos of someone with trauma who doesn't get it dealt with appropriately, who goes into a cult and then is traumatized even farther. And, it just, there's no real help. None at all.
Yep. Yeah.
It's sad.
I think you're definitely right about it too. I think he was abused in multiple ways, probably.
Yeah.
My grandfather wasn't the best person either. Yeah, poor dad. I guess it's interesting because I guess the healing I have done through the years has been I don't look at my dad as a villain anymore like I did at one time.
No, he's a hurt person.
I look at him as a victim.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, when you can have compassion for someone else, even though, I mean, he, you told earlier one of the experiences of him. I mean, he was abusive in a lot of ways. But,
yeah.
And so there's pain that is created by that abuse. But on the other hand, a lot of times we can balance it out and not let it consume us by, accepting the fact that he just was a very, very hurt individual who was a victim in his own right, and he did end up victimizing others, and that's not cool, and it hurts. But he's also just a man, just a person, and he obviously had a lot of pain, and it's sad.
Yep.
It really is. I'm sorry that it all had to go down like that, because it's just terrible for everybody. So where do you, when that happens, that's such a big event in your life, did you find support anywhere inside the congregation or your family or with your husband at the time, I guess?
My husband did decent with supporting me. I guess at that time we were still young enough in our relationship. Even though it wasn't long after that everything went down. So I did feel like I had the support from him, but nothing really helped until I actually went to counseling, where I could really, I think what I needed mostly was to forgive my dad, in a way. So the counselor I was going to at the time suggested that I write out a letter to my dad, and, he's like, you may never get to, he's not going to necessarily see it, but you can get it out on paper, and there's something to be said about it.
Yeah, it's closure. It's a way to get a little closure.
Yeah, and it really did help. I mean, I feel, for the most part, I feel like I've dealt with that. But, yeah, it was a very traumatic event in my life, and it shaped quite a few relationships since then. It's been interesting.
Well, actually,
how that affected things. Mm-hmm.
Isn't that wasn't it after that you started talking to the man that you ended up kissing or whatever? Like, wasn't it? Or didn't you say that it was not long after that when that stuff went down? I mean, so you were looking for emotional support, in some way, and maybe escaping in your own way, and
exactly,
because you're human and you were hurting.
Yep, exactly. I was just depressed. Depressed. I mean, there was so much negative in my life between the religion, and then I hated my job at the time. I was gaining weight because I was depressed. My father had killed himself. It was just, it was a very dark time in life. And I made choices that I'm not even proud of during that period.
Yeah, but you got to forgive yourself for those too, just like you got to forgive him, right?
And I have, it's I can look back and at least understand why. I'm not trying to make excuses for anything that I did, but at least I can understand why, and I can move past it.
Yeah, absolutely. Good for you.
Yeah. And I don't believe I mentioned in there during my manic episode and my run from my husband,
to Cleveland.
My truck broke down about halfway through that in Montana.
Goodness. Of course.
And I had a few $100s to my name, and I was halfway between my husband, who I would not run back to, and basically the person I was going to see in Cleveland, who didn't have transportation to get me. So I definitely went through a very interesting situation. I ended up jumping in a truck with a trucker on a semi. He put all his stuff in his truck and drove me the rest of the way to Cleveland, where I then met up with a man who I had never met in my life, who ended up being the father to my daughter. I am a single mom of one now. And the reason that I stayed in Ohio for 8 years. And anyway, it's quite a story. I still can't believe I jumped on a truck with trucker. I mean, I was the most innocent person in the world. I was a Jehovah's Witness.
So yeah, you trusted people at times, or you
I did.
Or you just were desperate and stuck between a rock and a hard place, so to speak, and needed a way to get from Montana to Cleveland. So this trucker was just like a good Samaritan then, who ended up helping you.
He was such a nice guy. Looking back, I just can't believe I did it. But yeah, he actually gave up his bunks in his truck. I think it was like 2 nights and days. He let me sleep, and he sat behind his steering wheel with his pillow on the steering wheel and slept on his steering wheel. He never tried anything, thankfully. And he got me to Cleveland. And not only that, but he made sure that he met the person I was meeting up with, because he found out my whole story, and he was worried what I was meeting.
So he was actually looking out for you.
He was, yes.
Wow.
It was interesting.
Imagine that a worldly person is actually looking out for somebody. It does happen, right? I mean, It's not what we were all told that everyone was on the outside.
Exactly. He was my surrogate father for a few days. That's how it felt to me.
Yeah.
So that was, quite an interesting story. And then I was in Ohio for maybe about a week at that point. That was when I met my daughter's father, like I said. And then my husband tracked me down. I never really finished that story with him. He tracked me down and told me he wanted to have me come back and try and work it out. At that time, he basically was like, I want you to come home and I want to try and work it out. That's basically all he was saying. And eventually I decided that I should try and give my marriage a chance. I took 3 days to go back on a bus. And when I got back, he picked me up at the bus station and drove me to our house. Mind you, I'd been gone a week. Mm-hmm. He drove me to our house to pick up my bag, and I was going to live in my mom's house in the attic. And we were going to get a divorce, and we were going to date again to marry. And
that's a weird plan that he concocted the entire thing?
He totally concocted this entire thing.
Okay.
In fact, I even remember talking to the elders about it. When we were, of course, they brought me back in, and I had to tell my whole story, everything that ever happened while I was there for that week, and he got to listen to every detail. And he and I told them this plan, and they were like, no, they actually did the right thing in this circumstance. They were like, no, that's not how it works. You either forgive her and you move on in your marriage, or, you have grounds to leave. And if you want to leave, you leave. So he then presented me with divorce papers. This whole time, though, he was seeing a girl that was my friend behind my back. And this started before I even had left And I basically wanted to go back to Ohio once he served me with papers. My mom was trying to talk me into going back to the Kingdom Hall. But after that meeting where I was grilled and had to tell every detail, and basically they were talking about reproving me because I was repentant. They decided I was repentant, surprisingly. So as far as I know, I've never been disfellowshipped. But they, I just could never go back to the Kingdom Hall. I basically told my mom I just can't do it. And I ended up getting a job just temporarily to be able to move back, or to move to Cleveland, and worked at the mall. And my husband decided he's going to go eat lunch at the mall with this girl that he's seeing. Mm-hmm. Just the rudeness of that. I couldn't believe. I'm like, of all the places you guys could have gone on a date, you're going to come to the mall where I work. That's just really cool, you know. Anyway, interestingly, after that whole thing, I did, of course, go back to Cleveland and stayed for 8 years, had my daughter. But he and I divorced. What was it? It maybe took, I don't know, 6 to 9 months for everything to go through because we were doing it ourselves. He got married the day our divorce went through to this girl. And they ended up, I don't know, married for a few years. And backing up, he decided he never wanted to have kids because, you know, the literature says don't have children because they'll be used against you in Armageddon, or at least at that time they kind of said that. Plus, do you want to bring kids into this horrible world, you know, and all of that. So we struggled. That was one of my main struggles in our marriage, was I wanted children. And of course, at 18, when I got married, I didn't say I wanted children because I didn't know, you know. And in fact, one of the things he did to spite me was he actually got fixed to where he couldn't have children. And that was a devastating blow for me. But anyway, he remarries, and this girl wants children too. So they adopted 2 children.
Oh, wow.
From another country. And interestingly enough, not interesting, this just goes to speak to the kind of person he ended up, I found out years later that he ended up being put in jail for molestation of a child.
Oh no, the adopted the kids he adopted.
I don't know. It wasn't the kids he adopted.
I mean, not that it really matters. Whoever he did it to, it's awful.
Yep. I believe it was maybe one of the friends of one of the children he adopted, but I don't know the whole details of who it was. I've read an article online about it that was brought to my attention by one of my people I knew up there.
So then it was in the news. It was legit, and he ended up going to jail, I guess.
Yep.
Wow.
And there were so many Jehovah's Witnesses supporting him, behind him, that they ended up giving him like a lighter sentence. They had some kind of program for a person who was a first-time offender of this nature, and he had a lot of support from his family and congregation, so they let him off the hook.
Okay, let's just repeat that for repetition for emphasis, as Jehovah's Witnesses would say. So the child molester in their midst was convicted and received a lighter sentence because the congregation backed him so hard. Yep. That's
he only
messed
served
up.
a year in jail. A year.
Okay, because the congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses backed the child molester up so hard.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And from what I know, like I said, I only know what's in the article and what little I know from people who've talked to me. But from what else I know, he, because they were Jehovah's Witnesses, the child and the mother, they weren't trying to push for a heavy sentence per se.
Of course not. Of course not.
It's lucky it even got
brother.
Right, exactly. I don't know the whole story behind that because obviously it got reported, unlike so many that aren't reported. It's angering. But yeah.
Well, how horrible does it have to be reported?
Yeah.
It's all awful. God. So, well, I guess it was good in the end that you never had kids with him.
Exactly, and that was why I brought this up, because, it's interesting looking back, even though you go through these horrible things, that marriage didn't work out for a reason, That's how I look at it. I didn't need to be part of that religion. I didn't need to be with somebody who was like that. Like, I wanted children, and I'm glad I didn't end up having children with him, Quite a situation.
Yeah. So then you ended up going to Cleveland, and you did. So the person that you had met through the video game or whatever, you said that was the father of your daughter.
Yes.
So you all had a relationship, and then were you a witness in Ohio at all, or?
Not at all. I never set foot in a Kingdom Hall in Ohio.
Oh, so you were just done.
I was done. Like I said, I just stuck my head in the sand and I started living like a worldly person immediately. And in a lot of ways, it was a very freeing and great experience. I grew by leaps and bounds when I was out there, but it was also a pretty abusive situation in itself. Not physically abusive, but unfortunately, my daughter's father is not a healthy person.
Sure.
Of course, I was attracted to somebody who had narcissism issues and other issues in his life that attracted me as, the codependent person that I am or that I am working on now, but still that I became because of the religion, because of my alcoholic father, because of all the situations I found myself in life, and not having help myself. I, of course, ended up in a pretty unhealthy relationship. But I did, I look back on it, even though it wasn't great. I look back on it as huge growth, a huge learning experience. I found who I am through that experience and what I'm not. And I was able to move back home to where I felt comfortable and was able to still stay strong and not get sucked back in. So I am thankful for those things. And I got my beautiful daughter out of that relationship. So I can't say that it was a regret at all. It was, not the best time in my life, but it was, it was ultimately good. So
I mean, let's face it, most of us weren't taught very many healthy things as far as, there wasn't a lot of emotional intelligence espoused to us.
Yep.
We didn't really know who we were. We were in a very narcissistic cult, and you get out and you're going to make mistakes, but those relationships and those mistakes help you learn. That's if you are a person who takes the time to do an autopsy on these situations and really see where things went awry and what you could have done differently, or what it shows about you, or whatever the case may be, which I know you've spent time doing. The best lessons often come from some of the hardest times, and
it's true.
So there are good things to be taken away from it as well.
For sure.
So you moved then back to California.
Yeah.
Back where you were from originally?
Yep. Well, once we put down.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah. Back where the 6th grade roots started.
The closest it could be.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, I'm still at home, and we've been here since. I think I moved back in 2007, so been here quite a while. Have a good job. Despite never going to college. Well, I can't say I never went to college. Something else interesting about me, when I was in Ohio, I did start going to college to be an interpreter for the deaf. Something I didn't mention is that the woman that my ex-husband was seeing behind my back at the end was deaf. And my friend and I ended up actually really getting interested in sign language because of her. I had it in my life previously from a boy that was in our congregation when I was younger who was deaf, and a bunch of us took, a few classes to try and learn. Anyway, I always had a fascination with it. I love sign language. It's a beautiful language, and decided, hey, I'm free. I could go to college. I signed up, and I took about a year and a half, I think it was, of classes. And, it was part-time because I was also working 2 jobs because I was in a relationship where I was the only one that worked.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And then I ended up pregnant with my daughter, and I interrupted school because I almost lost her. And my doctor's basically like, something has to give here. You can't do school and 2 jobs and be pregnant. Your body just can't handle it,
That's a lot.
So I couldn't give up the jobs. They were what kept us living. And so I ended up having to give up school. So that it's kind of too bad. But that was a little bit of school I did, and it was great to be able to do a little bit. But the profession I ended up in has nothing to do with that. I'm actually an escrow officer. So it's a profession that you don't have to have gone to college, but I can make good enough money, So
Yeah.
I'm proud of myself that I ended up finding something that I could support me and my daughter, even in California. Super expensive to live.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like ultimately I did pretty good for myself, despite everything stacked against me. And I'm lucky to have my daughter.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, so today then, so now you're in California, you and your daughter, and you've got a career. You're back where your family was from originally, kind of, we'll call it your roots. So, where you are today, what's your relationship with Jehovah's Witnesses or your family? You kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but just kind of where have you ended up as far as all of that goes?
Well, like I said, 2 of my brothers are no longer Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're both married. Have a couple, a niece and a nephew too from one of them. So I have that little family there, which is wonderful. My 3rd brother's still in. He's married as well. I don't get to see or talk to him as much, but it's not like I don't have any contact, so that's good. I do have my mother in my life. We've gone through our ups and downs, as you know, Michael. But at this point in my life with her, we have a relationship that just doesn't revolve around the religion as much as possible. She, of course, goes through her times where she just can't help but preach to me. And I basically have, at a certain point, recently told her, if you talk to me about it, then I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm thinking or feeling and what I feel, and I know that could bother you. So you choose, it's basically your choice. So most of the time we just stay off that topic, and it's good. But, I feel like I can't really be me with my mom, and that's something I even told her recently, that I don't feel I can be me, and that's hard. But I'm lucky. I am lucky because a lot of people don't even have a relationship with their parents. Obviously I don't have my dad, but my mom at least is still in my life, and she's been a big help with me and my daughter through the years. And I'm thankful that I have been able to talk to her and put my feelings out there. That was super hard to do. And it, she didn't react the best, but she also reacted much better than I expected. So there's healing going on there. I do have a lot of family around here. Most of them are, all my aunts and uncles are still Jehovah's Witnesses. I have very little contact with them, mainly because I'm not really invited to the family things that are witness surrounding. I see them at times of like funerals or baby showers or whatever, those kind of things. And they will always say hi and talk to me on a non-spiritual level. And so, I'm one of the lucky ones there. And then I have a lot of cousins, like I've told you before. Quite a few of them are no longer in the religion. I don't have super close relationships with all of them, but they're all, it's funny how our family is. We all know we're there and we can reach out to each other, and we do if and when needed. And when we come together, it's like old times. Mm-hmm. Those of us that are still willing to hang with each other, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, it could be much worse. I feel like I came through much more unscathed than a lot of people, but still a lot of things that, were clearly affected by the cult, as I call it. I don't call it a religion anymore.
You can now say the C word.
Yes.
So, so you've been out now for a while. How long have you been? When was the period, I guess, where you started watching Lloyd's videos or whatever? Like, how long would you say you've been mentally and emotionally out and awake?
Well, I'd say my daughter was probably about 4 to 5 when I started watching the videos. And she's 14 now.
Okay.
So it's been quite a few years now that I would consider myself mentally out. Okay. I was obviously, what do you call it? PME? No.
POMI? Physically out, mentally in?
I was POMI for quite a few years, I realized. As are some of my cousins currently. Yeah. I think a lot of them are like, not really doing the daily things you're supposed to do as a Jehovah's Witness, but they still believe it in their guts,
It takes work. It takes work to be able to break down and undo a lot of that indoctrination. It's not something that just comes because you walk away.
Exactly. And the thing I'm most thankful for is that I did figure it out at least enough before I had my daughter that I never indoctrinated her in any way. And I'm so thankful for that. I know that ultimately she's going to have an easier time, at least in that aspect of her life. Yeah. I stopped the cycle, and I'm thankful for that.
Nice. What do you, you've been out now for quite a while, more mentally and emotionally awake for 9-10 years. What's something that you've learned since, leaving, just in your life that's really impacted your life for the better? We weren't taught a lot of tools. We just weren't given much to work with a lot of times, other than, the doctrines of Jehovah's Witnesses in our lives. Is there anything that you've learned that's really been a good lesson for you since you've been out that's helped you a lot?
I think the biggest thing is never to just take somebody's word for something. I research, I read, I look into things. I'm not ever I just don't want to be ever just following somebody because they say that I should, like research, read for yourself, learn, go back to school if you can. I think, education in general, which we were sadly lacking as Jehovah's Witnesses, that's the biggest thing for me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a totally different way than the way we were originally taught. So what do you enjoy about your life, now? So you're out, you're in California. What do you, with your daughter, what do you love about your life now? And is there anything that do you have any dreams, anything that you're wanting to do in the future?
Well, I'm so thankful to have my daughter. She has been the bright, shining star in my entire life. And I really love having a relationship with her, an open one that, she can question and she can talk to me, and we have a very good relationship because of that. And I think the thing that I enjoy most is getting to travel with her. Something that I didn't get to do as a kid that I love. And when we're not in a pandemic.
Yeah, this year's been rough for travel.
Yeah, we do a lot of traveling together. We've gone on quite a few cruises, and I'm looking forward to hopefully getting to go to Europe with her after this. Because I've been able to find a decent job and work my way towards somewhat of a normal, life, and being able to live here in this beautiful area. I feel like ultimately things worked out, and I'm thankful. I'm thankful despite everything that's happened in my life, and despite the fact that I was in a cult. I think things worked out for the better in the end. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's great. No, I mean, look, everybody has their obstacles in life. Nobody gets through this unscathed. And
Yeah.
In the end, you have found things that you love, and you have someone that you love in your life. You have your daughter with you, and
Mm-hmm.
you've been able to make something of the situation that you were in.
Yep.
This could have easily gone, to some really terrible places. And your experience is uniquely yours, even though, I've done, let's see, I know I just released episode 80, and I'm always, 4 or 5 ahead, in the backlog. So let's say I've done like 85 of these interviews or so.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's got their own unique story, even though so many things are the same or similar. Your story certainly touches on a lot of things that have been mentioned before, but also, you didn't have, you had a lot of people around you and some friends and some things growing up, and maybe some different circumstances at times. But in the end, we still end up touched by so many of the same things when we come from these organizations, and you've been able to make something of yourself, that, make a life that you're happy with in some ways. And ultimately, isn't that what it's about? Right. I mean, what else?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm hoping one of the other things you had asked was if I had goals or something looking forward to besides travel. Someday I wouldn't mind finishing my schooling for interpreting.
Yeah.
Because that's something that I had a hard time through my life discovering, was where any kind of passion lied within me. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's snuffed out in the cults. You can't have passion. You can't have a drive towards something because it's all supposed to be about Jehovah.
Mm-hmm.
And so finding that passion, and that's one of the few places in my life where I found that fire in my belly that I want to do that. So that's something I'm looking forward to. I feel like at this point, because, my daughter's at an age where if she wants to go to college, and right now she is expressing that interest, then I want her to be able to, and that's my goals here, towards getting her to college. And then I'm going to go back afterwards. I'm going to go back and do that for myself. And, whatever ends up happening with that, I do like my job that I'm currently with, and I feel like it's gotten me to places in my life I probably wouldn't have been able to get without it. But even if it's just a part-time hobby, or something of that nature, something I do part-time just to find that passion in my life, that's what I'm looking forward to.
Oh, I just had an idea. You can be the sign language interpreter for all my videos and podcasts.
I love it.
We'll put them up on YouTube.
Let's do it.
No, that is a really cool, goal. And, I was thinking, as you were saying it, we could have things we were passionate about as witnesses, but they were going to be the things that we were going to maybe do in the new system, right? Like there's paradise is going to come, and then we can do this. Well, ASL would not be needed in their paradise,
right?
with the beliefs they have. There would not be deaf individuals, and so or hearing impaired. So it is interesting that you really do have kind of a unique thing that you get to pursue, and I mean, I think I can speak for anyone listening and saying that, yeah, we would all like to see you be able to go back since it was something you love so much and you didn't get to finish. I think that would be amazing when the time comes, for whatever you use it for, even if you just did it for your own edification. Good for you,
I plan on it for sure.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you, being able to tell your story, and I'm sure it will help somebody else out there who's been through similar things, to know that they're not alone, and that there's a lot that they can get out of life after Jehovah's Witnesses as well, or whatever cult they were, introduced to.
Yeah, it's true. And I want to thank you, Michael, because you are doing great work that I know has helped so many people out there. This podcast so helped me through my unindoctrination period, I call it. Listening to all the stories of people and what they went through, knowing that you weren't alone means a lot. Yeah. And then also I found a lot of times where I could find that I was fortunate. Like I've said many times through my story here, and it was because of those stories. And there was nothing like this out there previous to your podcast. So thank you for doing this for all of us, and I'm sure for you, it's probably helped you along the way too. Yep. And also I very much appreciate, I'm not ashamed to say that I work with Michael on coaching, and he's amazing. I have done so much growing just in these months that we've been working on that. And I highly recommend it to anybody out there looking for a little help. So
well,
what I wanted to say to you, Michael.
I appreciate the heartfelt endorsements. I've loved working with you, obviously, too. And I do appreciate, everybody that gets on here and is brave enough to tell their stories, because, although obviously I love helping people, I love working with people. It's a huge part of my life. I love the fact that other people, by being brave enough to get on here and tell their story, they're doing that in their own way as well. And, you're doing that right now, and all the people before you and after you, the same thing. So, it's all a humbling experience. It's something to be, it's a wonderful thing to get to participate in. And yeah, I enjoy every minute of getting to work with people. However, whether it's in through my coaching practice, or whether it's on the podcast here, it's meant a lot for my life as well. So we all help each other in different ways, right?
So true.
Yep,
thank you, Michael.
Absolutely. As always, I want to thank everybody that's brave enough to get on here and tell their story, so that they can help those that listen. And I hope that in listening back to it, you get a different perspective and can give a little more weight to what you experienced and find some more healing. If you're listening, you can support today's guest by leaving a comment of support on the website at shunnedpodcast.com on the episodes page. While there, you can find the date for the next Shunned Recovery Project online meetup, reach out for one-on-one coaching to get moving on your new life, or buy some merch and rep the show. Visit my other site, ex-JWhelp.com, for helpful videos and a downloadable roadmap of life after leaving, as well as resources like meetups, books, and a lot more. Join the Facebook support group called Shunned Podcast. Find us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and more as Shunned Podcast. Leave a review on iTunes or other podcast apps for both this and the original podcast, This JW Life, so that more people can find these stories and get the help that they need. Donating equals loving. So if you love these stories and find them helpful, please support the show at patreon.com/shunned. And there's some rewards there, and it really means a lot to me to see that people support what I'm doing, and it helps me to do more. The theme song for today is No Hell Yet by Fair Voyeur. And as I end all episodes, love others, do no harm, and go be happy.
We'll curse God